over the last 3 months and deserved their spot. Tensai unfortunately did not manage to play that much, but he won the last Invitational, so he's got his he managed to get his spot and qualified through that, and we're excited to go. We've got the first match ready. We have Tensai, the reigning champion, against the first placed player of the last quarter, who is Arne from Germany, from Hanover, local legend there. Also known as the Joker because he just loves to play non-blue decks and therefore has a lot of chokes in the sideboard as usual, and is really dedicated to his one deck, Naya Depths, which he's playing today.
Yeah, I'm incredibly happy that you and I actually get to be the ones commentating this round today. I'm quite a Naya Depths player myself. It's definitely one of my favorite decks and a deck that I specialize in. And you have a long storied history of playing Jeskai Control, especially in that kind of heyday when we really had the Hull Breacher, Days Undoing loop starting to come into play. You kind of touched on this a little bit, right? This is our invitational. This is our quarterly event that happens every 3 months. Players on our local MTG player Discord earn points through leagues, through Saturday events, and then the top 7 spots get to come and do this double elimination bracket. As you did mention, also Tensai being the previous winner has won way too many of these invitationals at this point. Tensai decided to take the season off and not really play with us, but still got to get that locked in seat from being the previous winner. This is double elimination bracket, so we're going to be looking at this top bracket first. As players lose, they get shot down to the bottom bracket, the losers bracket, if we want to call it that, where they will have one more chance to continue their train going. And if they lose, they are unfortunately out of this bracket. Because this is a seeding type deal, we do already know that Arn is going to be on the play. Arn getting that first seed will be able to be on the play for the entirety of his run in the upper bracket. Once we get to the lower bracket, however, players will start to roll to see who goes first, right? They lose their advantage at that point. So here's my big question for you, right? Who do you think is favored in this game one? We can talk a little bit about the individual deck lists, but I think that for the most part, looking at these lists, they're fairly stock. There's a lot of like sideboard changes, to be totally honest, but the standard Naya depths versus the standard Jeskai control that is on the Hull Breacher Days Undoing plan, who do you think would be advantaged in that?
It's going to be really interesting. Usually Arne plays a bit of a different version without Mox Diamonds and more catered to play actually against control decks because that's a lot of his local meta, his paper meta. And he switched it out because he was expecting more combo decks and added the Mox Diamonds in, which he usually doesn't want to play as its card disadvantage. And he's definitely always in for the grindier games with depths. And so that's going to be an interesting thing. Also, one of the cards that he sacrificed basically for that in the main deck slot for the Mox Diamonds is Minsc and Boo, Timeless Heroes. So this 4-mana Planeswalker has made a lot of impact in Paper Legacy. I don't think it's available on Magic Online yet, which is really interesting. And yeah, so that is definitely something that probably puts him down a bit in the first match, in the first game. And after sideboarding, he's probably more back to his normal setup to play against control.
Thank you so much for the follow. So the chat is asking, right, what is Arn actually playing today? As you mentioned, Arn is kind of notorious in the Green White Depths community for just blatantly playing without Mox Diamonds, which is actually this fantastic thing to do when you're going up against a bunch of prismatic ending control decks. A lot of the times on the Green White Depth side, we start to board out the Mox Diamonds once we get to post board games. It's a pretty bad top deck later in the game. You don't need to be as explosive, and getting blown out on turn 1 by a prismatic ending is just one of the worst feelings ever. Arn in his local community, just every single time he posts his FNMs, it's just all control decks for the most part. So it just doesn't even play them. But today there was a couple combo players that were kind of threatening the pod. One of the things that I know that you're aware of eternally is when it comes to these invitational matches, you know all the other 7 players and you know the deck lists that they're famous for, right? So when you see Fabrizio is going to be in this event with you, you have to have Oops on your radar. When you see Black Skydock is in the invitational, you have to have Doomsday on your radar. And as a result, Arn really decided I got to go back to the Mox Diamonds and have that explosivity rather than a main deck that's really suited to go up against control. Ironically enough, that immediately pairs up against Jeskai control for this first round. God, that's just hilarious, to be totally honest. One thing is we get this going, by the way, exclamation point bingo. Throughout today's stream, through all of the matches, there's going to be a bingo board. Exclamation point bingo will bring you to a site where you're going to get a randomly automated bingo. If you happen to be watching this stream over the next couple hours, go ahead and check off things when they're happening. Maybe you have a box that's me ranting about sign cards at some point. Maybe you have a box about something about us talking about basic lands or an event in the game. Go ahead and hit that, get that bingo board. And if you happen to get a bingo, that's the full line across, side, diagonal, vertical. You'll go ahead and get one of our prizes sent to you. We're a little up in the air of what that's going to be. Maybe it'll be a damage card. Maybe it'll be a whiteboard card. Who knows? We'll figure that out later on. But the players have started going off now. We do have Arn being on the play, of course, and goes and deploys an Elvish Reclaimer. Really, unfortunately, the second land is not Flagstones. I was kind of confused for a second, thought, oh, we have the combo together, but instead has that turn 2 Caracas coming down. While Tensai is still just doing sculpting, goes for that snow-covered island and early ponder, trying to set up the hand.
It's also interesting that like the tournament reclaimer is like the probably most common or best play for Naya depths, and Tensai does not have an answer to that. He's been pondering twice, and the reclaimer is still on the board. Also, it can potentially protect itself with the Jury Step, and the Caracas immediately goes to the graveyard. Let's see what Ane goes for. It might be just flagstones to just build board presence. Yeah, that's what we see here. And just develop his own plan. He knows it's probably not going to be a quick Moret Lash that will win him the game because of all the disruption that the control decks have for that. So he's just trying to develop here.
One of the great things about Green White Depths, as you kind of mentioned, is that it really does not have to be on an explosive game plan. It can be threatening turn 3, turn 4 Merit Lesion kill in these matchups where you need to be more quick. But in the control matchups, you're so much more favored than the traditional Turbo Depths or Green Black Depths because you get to play a Maverick deck that has a 2020 payoff eventually. So you get to be kind of threatening the board already with Elvish Reclaimers getting to 3/4s, with Knight of the Reliquaries, and then be setting up a Merit Lodge with double protection, right? With like double activations for Sageri Step, or with the Sylvan Safekeeper in play. So this is definitely one of those matchups that you can take your time. Of note, because we have open deck lists, of course, and Arn does know that he's up against Jeskai control, we know that that Caracas is literally just a plains that gets locked down by back to basics or gets wastelanded. Not that that happens in this matchup, but its utility is incredibly, incredibly low here. So just very, very comfortable going ahead and assembling combo. The running joke when Elvish Reclaimer first kind of broke onto the legacy scene, Francisco Palas created a green-white Reclaimer deck. That wasn't really like green-white depths. It was a lot more setting up and building towards Field of the Dead and a Valak end plan. But when that deck hit the scene, a bunch of control players in Legacy community were like, oh, this is such a bad matchup. This is terrible. Until they figured out that you just kill Elvish Reclaimer on the spot every single time. It looks so innocuous. Elvish Reclaimer looks like it does so little, but man, what a hell of a magic card when paired with Flagstone to Troikair.
It's also really interesting now. If Tensai doesn't have a Force of Will, he's setting himself up to a potential to potentially get blown out by crop rotation. Crop rotation, sacrifice flagstones and get Moret Lash, but Arne is here just sacking the flagstone to the Reclaimer, getting the Savannah for the flagstones and still thinking on the Reclaimer, which is interesting. So he might go for depths. I mean, there are also taps for mana thanks to Yavimaya, but at the same time, he might still be on a slower and conservative path here.
I do think
Also,
it's really either.
Meme Jesus, you mentioned it. Arne basically just never loses. Meme Jesus is one of the locals of Arne, so they've been playing, I think, a lot, and
Not a lot of
that's
story history playing against Arn.
yeah.
The search here is pretty easily Dark Depths or Flagstones, unless you have like really big mana constrictions and really want to get there's no main deck Minskin Boo, of course, in this deck, so I guess we don't really need to worry about red source in any way. So it is kind of a question of whether or not you want to be advancing your own mana or if you want to be setting up for being able to go for combo. And it looks like Arn does decide to go for Dark Depths. One of the interesting things, you see Tensai playing this 3 fairy on the previous turn. And going up, and you might wonder, why would you do that instead of bouncing the Elvish Reclaimer? Well, Tensai being a good player and knowing what exactly is to expect out of Arn's deck. If he would have gone for that down tick to do the down tick bounce draw on the Elvish Reclaimer, Arn would have been able to just fetch the Zeri step, protect the Elvish Reclaimer, and then also deny Tensai the draw. So Tensai, if wanting to get this get the Teferi out on the board, is obligated to just go up. You cannot choose to down tick. Just this really interesting thing, right? You see this ticking up on Teferi, and it seems like this can't be the right choice, right? But actually knowing the full deck list and knowing that there's the 2 Sajeri steps makes it clear that it's the only option if you are deploying that out to the board.
And interesting here, Reclaimer attacking Teferi. It's not taking Teferi down, but it's just slowly tugging at Teferi's life total and loyalty. Also, the Wasteland here might be huge. Like, Tensai's deck doesn't have a lot of targets for Wastelands. There's 2 Tundras and 1 Volcanic Island. But he actually manages to meet one here, despite Tensai usually being able to just play a lot on basics. And looks like Tensai is still on the conservative side here.
You really have to be when you're in Tensai's seat like this, right? Because you're looking at your opponent who's able to make Merit Lodge at any point. The Teferi might not look like it matters so much, but the reason that Arn's attacking into it is because what Teferi represents is it means Crop Rotation is no longer a protection spell, right? Turns off the instant speed abilities. So what Arn's choosing to be attacking into this Teferi and getting it off the board, very likely indicating that there is a crop rotation or wanting to play into being able to draw into that. That way he'll be able to go ahead and make the 2020 and still be able to protect it by holding up a crop rotation. So if Tensai goes to Swords the 2020 or instant speed prismatic ending, for instance, if Teferi was out. Ooh, is this an instant speed?
Also interesting, yeah. Instant speed prismatic ending thanks to Teferi on the Reclaimer now that it's not able to protect itself, and it manages to actually exile it. Arne therefore gets Ramunap Excavator, which definitely helps with punching through your combo because you can just replay your lands from your graveyard, and it requires Tensai to get basically more removal spells and remove the Excavator to stop that. And that's one removal spell that is not hitting Morilage.
100%. The Excavator, of course, being this amazing value card, especially up against control decks, we were able to just recur Wastelands and make it so they can only have basics for the rest of the game. The Brainstorm does find a force and blue card to be able to pitch, and I just want to know how many cards Arn has left in hand. It looks like 3 cards left. Ooh, in the main board, Outland Liberator, the Cosley Pride Mage, but better. All right, here's my question, Sven. How do you track day and night? This is a huge issue for me, right? Where I play a single Outland Liberator. Most of these decks do. If Outland Liberator leaves the battlefield, do you continue to track day and night? I realize you have to, but me as a terrible Magic player, I just immediately set that token to the side and say we'll figure it out if it comes up again.
Yeah, usually it doesn't matter. We're exactly in that spot right now. The Liberator just gets swords immediately, and Arne just packs in the token and puts it away. Because there's just no way it's going to matter anymore.
Dennis, thank you for the question. No, so what we are seeing right now is exactly what the players are seeing as well. So Tensai viewing Arn over in Germany is just seeing this screen that Arn has put up, his OBS Ninja link. We do have a table spotter down with them. Shout out to Pres BOTW who's hanging out in the chat with them and just relaying necessary information that we need to know, right? Funny table banter, life total changes if we need it. And so there are period of times where our table spotters are able to give us a little bit more insight than we're able to discern just from the video feeds. But for the most part, we have no idea what players actually have in their hands. Oh, it is Mick Diff in there. My apologies. Shout out to Mick Diff for being the one in the trenches, being the one giving us all that insight. We're seeing Flash in Endurance, it looks like. Or no, a Sorcery Speed Endurance because this Teferi is out. Fantastic.
While still having the potential Morilage on board. But the way the game plays right now, I don't think Tensai is interested in doing much besides trying to threaten the swords on the Morilage while there's no protection available.
Yeah, it's still this terrifying thing on Tensai's side where at the moment you just are never allowed to tap out. You always need to be respecting the fact that you can have a 2020 swinging back to you on the previous turn. Again, this Teferi being in play, just turning off crop rotation is so fantastic for you, though, as long as you're able to protect it.
I've played my fair share of Turbo Depths, and then Teferi is one of these cards you just don't want to see. It enables, like, it turns off all your protection. Of course, like, Arne has the benefits of having Elvish Reclaimer and Knight to instant speed, interact with the swords without actually having to cast a spell. And also the 1 of 7 Safekeeper, which if Arne finds a green Sun Zenith, that might just very well be the key card, especially this late in the game with so many cards. Also, interestingly, Arne chooses to actually shuffle back Tensai's Graveyard, mostly probably because Tensai is on 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage, I think. Yeah, two copies of Snapcaster Mage, so he can use his Graveyard and there's Swords and Prismatic Ending, which are both good cards to get back. And I think exactly that is probably the reason why Arne is going to just try and remove Tensai's Graveyard.
Yeah, it's very much free to do. There's no way of getting punished by going for the tuck there, so you just do it. Just be playing around the Snapcaster Mage. If this was not open decklist, if this was closed, this would still be correct, even if you're just expecting there to potentially be Mystic Sanctuary. It isn't like we're at a point in the game where the graveyard is chalked with like 3 swords, multiple prismatic endings, and you have to do the gambit of, all right, well, if I tuck and they fetch, then all of a sudden the rate of getting to these removal spells again is so much higher off the top of the deck.
And
It being this early game just makes it basically free.
yeah, Arne taking the chance here, getting the Marit Lash into 3 cards from Tensai's hand. And I think the reason might just be that he just got rid of the graveyard and therefore did not not expect the Snapcaster Swords. Oh, and the Wandering Emperor. That's a good card here to have. That's not just like, usually you have the problem that Marit Lash just gains your opponent 20 life and it takes a whole lot of time to get rid of that. And Arne probably gets blown out here.
You just gain 2. And of course, this Teferi being in play means that, like we keep saying, if there's a corrupt rotation in hand that was not able to protect, ooh,
Yeah,
just an absolute blowout. I can respect going for it there. That does make me think that the makeup of Arn's hand is fairly weak. It's not like we're expecting any Green Sun Zeniths or Knights or Reclaimers in there that would have been able to set up protection. So just in that point of, all right, we have to go for it because it's only getting worse from here. And unfortunately, the 1 of Wandering Emperor being in hand and being able to blow it out. It really was that or the swords, and there was a Teferi uptick as well, right? So I guess there was also a chance of it being 2 prismatic endings as well. So a good number of cards that are able to blow you out, like a good 6 or 7, but you kind of just have to try to thread the needle at a certain point and take the chance.
yeah. With the Teferi bounce, it's also you don't have to worry about instant speed prismatic ending, which is another thing. Oh, and Arne just has some backup depths. Let's see if he also has a route to the combo. There's a Reclaimer, so he's pretty close to just doing it again. Just basically 1 turn away. So next turn he's threatening Marit Lash again.
Yeah, these Naya depth stacks, what they've started to do is traditionally the green white depths were playing like a 3 of Thespian Stage and 3 of Dark Depth, so it was the same numbers. However, as we've started to switch to Red Splash and wanting to still maintain our high amount of utility lands, it's actually been shifting down to only have 2 Dark Depths and have 3 Thespian Stages. So just want to point out, it's a lot better that the extra backup land was the second Dark Depths than the Thespian Stages, because we're way more likely to spike second Thespian Stage or get access to it than we would have if we had put Thespian Stage out here and we're looking for that 1 of Dark Depths that's still remaining.
However,
Ooh,
like
and
Arne shuffled back his own graveyard with Endurance to get access to the second depths again. Oh, the Reclaimer, yeah, eating the ending. That's rough. Otherwise, he'd been in for the combo again. Now it's just Endurance versus 2 Planeswalkers. The
yeah,
Wandering
it is.
Emperor, luckily enough for Arne, cannot produce a token without dying, so he's got a choice now between attacking Teferi or the Emperor.
I do think you need to be attacking into the Emperor here, just because the Emperor is going to be the thing that gums up the board. Yeah, it looks like Arn agrees. You can beat this Teferi in terms of playing the Maverick game plan, but it's going to be incredibly hard to beat the Wandering Emperor. So Arn putting Tensai in the spot of you need to have instant speed swords or other prismatic ending in that exact point right now. Or I'm going to, or I'll be able to start winning the ground game before Emperor can really start going off.
Oh, and that's another huge one. Arne has the Green Suns, and Tensai manages to counter it with Force of Negation, just exiling it forever.
Not a lot of
That would
great
have been,
targets for Force Negation in this
yeah,
deck, but that's definitely it. It is that and Sylvan Library is your good cards you want to hit with it. Oof. But
definitely. Still,
go
a
ahead. Go
clean
ahead, Aaron.
one. Tensai deciding on just tapping 5 mana. Let's see, what's this? That's Snapcaster Mage for Prismatic ending on the Endurance. So Tensai is slowly starting to take over the game. Both players on 1 card in hand, 5 lands in play, but Tensai has the advantage of having Teferi plus a Snapcaster in play. So, oh, and the Reclaimer off the top.
We have a little update from one of our other matches. So Malfi versus Amaru. Malfi was on 4-color Madness, Jund Madness splashing white for Deafening Silence, and actually takes down Amaru on Blue-Black Ninjas in 2 games. Amaru will be going down to the bottom bracket, so we'll have some another chance to continue moving forward. But Malfi will be going on. Well, actually, I believe Malfi is going to be facing the winner of the Meteor and Black Sky Dock match, correct? Or am I remembering the bracket slightly incorrectly?
I think so. No, Arne or Tensai are facing the winner of Miro versus Black Sky Dog, and
Oh, so it's
Malfi
the
is gonna face the winner of Marnie versus
Fabrizio.
Fabrizio.
Ooh,
So
interesting.
I think Death Shadow against
Thought Lash.
Madness is also gonna be a rough one or an interesting one. Your life total can drop down quickly if your opponent is on Madness.
One of the downsides, of course, of Tensai's list and a lot of these Jeskai control lists is once you establish control of the game, it can be hard to actually close out, right? One of the big upsides to some of the other control builds, whether it's like the Bant builds or the Grixis builds that have been splashing Fury and Hidetsugu Consumes All, is you don't need to just do the swing in with Snapcaster Mage plan, right? Where Tensai's win conditions really are swing in with snaps, swing in with hull breachers, wandering emperor or Jace, and so we're just kind of sitting there and putting putting Tensai on the good old 9-turn clock at the moment with the
Yeah.
Snapcaster Mage.
It's also, Reclaim is just a 1/2 right now, so it trades with Snapcaster. But Narset is probably a good step for Tensai towards winning. Like, she's representing card advantage. You don't want to attack with your Reclaimer into the Snapcaster. Oh, and finds the swords. That's perfect for Tensai, and immediately snaps it off from Reclaimer.
And the terrifying thing for Arn now is you now are facing down this Narset, knowing that there's 2 Days Undoings in Tensai's main deck, where if he chains that at any, or if he draws it at any point, he's just going to immediately go up on 7 cards.
Yeah. And winning like with 1 card or no cards in hand against a control deck like that is just super hard.
It's one of those terrible things. Whenever you get Days Undoing with Narset out, you always go, at least it wasn't a Hall Breacher, right? At least I got to draw 1 card off this Days Undoing and they don't have 7 treasures.
Yeah, but I think in this spot, Narset is definitely better for Tensor because it also just represents card advantage. And it's not threatened or pressured in any way. So it's basically just there drawing, like, impulsing twice for cards that you really need, while at the same time being the potential combo card. And yeah, Tensai just taking it down, slowly taking control. I think the Snapcutter eating the swords is not too bad there.
No, I mean, it's expected that Arden's going to get them. He's definitely been sitting on these
Yeah,
swords throughout the game without any real targets to be pointing them at. So at this, it's that classic thing where it's like, oh, they always have Path to Exile for my Worm Coil. Well, it's because there's no other targets for it, right? These snaps are
yeah.
going to get swords in these game ones. Just because there's really nothing else besides it in the Hull Breachers. Of note, whenever we start to see Tensai, or I'm sorry, Arn start to take counters down the slow way on Dark Depths, you know that we got nothing to do for a little bit of time.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Another interesting thing that we haven't had before that's like an insider for us probably is Tensai is not playing his usual basics today. He's on snow basics. Like, he doesn't have any cards that interact with snow, but is still decided to go for the Ice Age snow basics here.
Gorgeous. I
He's
can
usually
respect that.
Might be because he doesn't have a full playset of the Venice Island, which he usually plays, or like Hong Kong Island as well. So
We see Arn taking a knight off the top. This is actually incredibly scary for Tensai. Definitely a card that needs to be responded to. And actually, this is specifically a punish for doing the down tick on Teferi on the previous turn. Just because if you had gone up, you would have had a way to delay a turn if you aren't able to find anything on this brainstorm. We should also mention these absolutely gorgeous brainstorms that are coming out of Tensai, right?
yeah,
Um,
also note for
for
you,
our
as
for
a
our
player,
league,
if you want to win one of these tokens, unfortunately the brainstorms are not available anymore, but these are the kind of prizes you get for taking down one of the Saturday events. Or if you happen to win the Invitational, like Tensai's done twice before, or three times, I think, maybe, you actually get a full playset.
yeah, we've gone through a good number of tokens. And also, it should be noted, if you win one of our monthly leagues, you also are able to get one of these tokens. We've gone through the full 5 set of 1 mana instant speed. We started off with Brainstorm, we got Dark Ritual, we got Lightning Bolt, Crop Rotation, and Source of Plowshares is the most recent one to complete the set of 5. The real secret is we still need somebody to come up with a deck that plays all 5 at once. The hard one is that Crop Rotation. That's the hard one to fit in.
Yeah, probably. I mean, also Dark Ritual. Like, if you play Swords, Lightning Bolt, and Brainstorm, what are you going to do with Dark Ritual? I think you're more likely to fit Crop Rotation into that deck. Also, thanks to our streamer for putting in the Lightning Bolt token here for you all to see.
And here comes the Days Undoing. All right, so what this represents right now is it represents Tensai refilling up to 7, immediately going to ending the turn. But Arn looks like they are just scooping up, calling
Yeah,
it right there.
it is so
Very
hard to get back from there, so it's probably... The matches take a long way. We're playing 75 minutes rounds today, but still these matches are potentially taking quite some time, so I think it makes sense to scoop here. So
yeah.
anyway, we can... Arne has his sideboard plan ready there, as it seems, coming prepared for the Invitational.
Arn and I were definitely talking in DMs before this event, going, wait, what's the exact plan against Oops? What is it against Shadow? What is it against Madness? We'll go ahead and we'll bring up the list. Right now, we actually have one of the Blue-Black Ninjas lists up, but we'll be going ahead and switching over to Arn's in just a moment. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about the sideboard, and internally, I'm going to ask you what you think you would like to board here. So in Arn's sideboard, we see the single Tower of a Magistrate, 2 Deafening Silences, 2 Prismatic Endings, 1 Pyroblast, 1 Red Elemental Blast, a Collector Oof, 1 Gaddock Teague, 2 Torpor Orb, 1 Endurance, 2 Force of Vigors, and 1 Minskin Boo, Timeless Hero.
Yeah, I mean, the last one is definitely the first one to come in these matchups. Minsc and Boo just wrecks these control decks. They have not a good way to interact with them besides forces, and that's always like trading down on resources. Also, the Red Elemental Blast and the Pyroblast are definitely cards you want to have. It's 1 mana interaction for basically like 90% of Tensai's cards, which is huge. And besides that, I think there's only an argument to be made for Gaddock Teague, because it shuts down a lot of Planeswalkers as well as Prismatic Ending, so it reduces the amount of removal. It also shuts down Arne's Green Sun Zenith, of course, but I think like if you look at the number of cards that are affected by Gaddock Teague, it's definitely a lot more in Tensai's deck, and especially cards that you want to hit if you're Arne.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a lot about the main cards that are fantastic to take to be bringing in. It should be noted that there are a ton of dead cards in Arn's deck that are pretty free to take out. You definitely want to be cutting back on swords substantially. However, you want to be keeping some in for the Hull Breachers potentially. Normally, normally these red shells they run 3 blast effect, which do allow you to counteract taking some of the swords out. Right, they're able to interact with the Hull Breachers still. But Arn playing a 61 card main deck and being up 2 mana sources over the traditional green white list just mean that he has a lot of flex cards that are able to be taken out. Blast Zone, one of his pet cards, is very reasonable to be taking out. It's incredibly slow to take out the 3 mana walkers. That and Maze are kind of your 2 free lands that you're able to take out. It also should be noted, we went through this really long period where Sylvan Library was an amazing card against control decks, but ever since the rise of the Hull Breacher Jeskai deck, they're far less slam dunk. Especially if I'm on the draw and I slam turn 2 Sylvan Library and then you just put Narset in play and I have no pressure on board, it just is an embarrassing card. However, you will absolutely want to be keeping it in. Some people similarly believe in hedging down on crop rotations. That's one of my personal cards that I like to hedge down on a singleton one against blue decks, just because it getting forced out is just absolutely insane. But there's a lot of cards that you're able to take out. I think also we do potentially want to be bringing in the endurances. I haven't played with a 4th endurance for a very long time, so traditionally I just go up to 3 against the blue decks. But knowing that you're up against Snapcaster Mage and it being a way to pressure counter magic, so flashing in an endurance that they have to respect and then being able to untap and deploy your knight is a reasonable play pattern that you can take against the control decks to be able to pressure the planeswalkers.
Notably, Meme Jesus, you just said that in the chat. There's no copy of Choke in the sideboard.
There is not, which is incredibly unfortunate. The one other thing that is notable is your prismatic endings are able to replace some of your swords because you're able to X3 them on the planeswalkers. But let's go ahead and we'll jump over onto 10-sized Jeskai Hull Breacher deck. We're seeing 2 Blue Elemental Blast, 2 Meltdown, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Surgical Extraction, 1 Null Rod, 1 Rest in Peace, 1 Torpor Orb, 2 Blood Moons. That's a card we should note. And 1 Court of Grace. What would you like to see out of this? You have a lot of experience with Jeskai decks.
I mean, obviously, Tensai knew who he is going up against, and Arne basically is on green-white depths all the time when he's not playing Maverick for like leisure. So Tensai knew he wanted to have something like Blood Moon in the deck, and I'm pretty sure Arne is not happy to see them. He has 2 main deck answers actually. He has a Boseiju and he has the Outland Liberator, and of course 2 basics. But still, like, depending on the timing and how fetchlands, etc. work out, Blood Moon can just be huge. Of the other cards that are in 10-size sideboard, maybe you bring in 1 surgical or 2. You have a realistic chance of surviving first Moridlash and being able to just surgical depths to take that one thing you have to care about off the table. But it's not a must, I think. And yeah, but besides that, there's not really much. I mean, the main deck is already pretty prepared for playing against Reclaimer.
Yeah,
Naya.
you do have some pretty easy cuts. Like Force Negation is a card that you can be trimming down on. Again, just because you really have Green Sun Zenith and Sylvan Libraries are cards that are targets for it. And you just get into a lot of situations where it just does not pay off well, right? It doesn't line up against the Green Sun X3 like it did in the previous game. It should be noted that we've been talking about how Arn being on the Mox Diamond list, and we should have talked that Mox Diamond is a card that is cuttable in this matchup as well. However, when you're against Blood Moon, that is the one time where you kind of do still want it against the control decks, because what you're able to do then is if Tensai plays Blood Moon and you have a single Mox Diamond in play, what you're able to do then is just get one of your basics. So either you like get it off of the flagstones, you get it on an early fetch, and then PE also represents a way to get rid of Blood Moon. Which without Mox Diamond is incredibly hard, and you actually need both basics to make that be a feasible plan. There is some potential that Arn also brought in Force of Vigor, basically only for Blood Moon. A lot of players don't hedge towards that. I'm not sure what Arn's sideboard philosophy is on terms of bringing in Blood Moon against, or bringing in Force of Vigors against known Blood Moons, because that's the only target. But we might actually see that as a way to combat this. Again, with these players having open deck lists, you know exactly what cards you need to play around. And so Arn, for instance, does not need to worry about Ruination this game, which traditionally on the green-white depth side, you are always playing around potential Blood Moon, potential Ruination, potential Back to Basics. You got to play around all 3. But at least Arn is able to say, all right, I don't need to worry about the Ruination, and it's just me being ready for Blood Moon and holding up Boseiju, for instance.
When Arne Mulligan to 6, playing the turn 1 Safekeeper, and Tensai has a prismatic ending, and he just sacrifices his land in play to protect that. I mean, it's basically, I think, accounting for the fact that the match is going slightly longer, and that like setting yourself back 1 land drop just might not make a difference.
Really interesting to be deploying the Sylvan Safekeeper so aggressively. A lot of times, green white depths players, they really sandbag it until the end when you're able to be using it as a protection piece for either the knights or your primary game plan of depths. The big issue, of course, when you're playing it out, turn one is exactly this, just turning every prismatic ending and swords into a potential strip mine. It is the one interesting part about it is able to technically tick at planeswalkers, right? So all of a sudden, if Tensai deploys Narset, Narset is only going to be good for 2 impulses, right?
And also the same thing with Teferi. If you activate or actually play Teferi, try to bounce the Safekeeper, you sack the land and attack Teferi down, and you can't really draw straight away.
Yeah. We saw Tensai be really good about acknowledging the ways that Arn is able to protect through Teferi, right? We saw in that first game going Teferi uptick instead of downtick because of the Sejiri set protection piece. So I have to imagine in the face of a Sylvan Safekeeper that if Tensai does deploy it, he'll just be going up, recognizing the denying that's going to be able to happen. But that is definitely a potential thing that can happen in the matchup. And again, Tensai just going ahead and starting to sculpt. And here's where the early Safekeeper is so interesting, right? Is now even in this on the second turn, Tensai immediately has the mana advantage. That one prismatic ending just eventually turned into I am now up 1 land over you for the rest of the game.
For sure. And also being up a card from mulligans and one from the draw is also something that I think that incentivizes this decision to just basically stone run your opponent and make them start in their development. Another one out you have to Sylvan Safekeeper, of course, is Supreme Verdict, and it also gets you closer to that.
That is very true. So we're seeing a land pass out of Arn. And Tensai just with a full grip here.
Also, for those of you, it might not be like that visible on camera, but Arne's deck is basically fully foiled out. Besides one card, he doesn't have a foil Tower of the Magistrate.
Turns out that card has gotten very expensive very
quickly. Definitely. It's like Green White Depths picked up Tower of the Magistrate. It's an old card. It's not even reserved list, but it's just probably a card that most people forgot about for quite some time. And now that it sees play again, and not just to unequipped equipment from unequipped Batterskull, it's also back into just making Morid Lush fly through Baleful Straits, fly especially through Thopters produced by Scythe, Thought Monitors, etc. That's just huge interaction now with 8-cast being so huge, and also one of the 8-cast decks being in our top 8 today.
Yeah, I mean, it originally started to come in when Urza Saga really came to the forefront in every single Urza Saga control deck. When there was like the Jeskai and blue-red Urza control deck, everyone had Retrofitter Foundry, which turns out was really good against Green-White Depths game 1. And Tower of the Magistrate just very quickly at first started as like a meme sideboard card of I'm going to waste a spot on this, and then everyone figured out it's actually nuts. Plus the upside of like you bring it in against Death and Taxes and Cauldron Complete is turned off because you just pro artifact the germ and it falls off. It is such a great card, but it turns out when a Mercadian Mask card starts to see play, the foil gets incredibly expensive. Looking at you, Rishidan, for it.
Yeah, also looking at Snuff Out, for example, which if we get there, Amaro has his, I think, Japanese foil Snuff Outs right now, which are just also have become super expensive, partly because of them being pauper staples, but also them seeing a lot more play in Legacy right now, being the one card out of a black deck that can easily kill a Murktide. And we have some fight here. Prismatic ending on the Sylvan Safekeeper is again met by giving the Safekeeper Shroud. Also note that it's a bingo square if you want one. Arne again sacking the land here.
Yeah, of note also,
as well.
This prismatic ending also coming off an EI. So EI in this situation representing an optional strip mine on the opponent and drawing a card off the top 3. Oh, it's so cool. What's your thoughts on expressive iteration in these control shells internally? I'm personally super on it, but the more that I talk with local control players, the more everyone's telling me, no, I don't think that's right in control. But man, there's nothing quite better than EI into land and you're the best card in your top 3.
That's exactly the thing. If you don't hit a land, it feels just so bad. It's your 2-mana Ponder that you can't shuffle. which happened to me a bunch of times already. So yeah, the thing with expressive iteration is if you have if you look at the Ozymandias list that are a bit lower to the ground, they run expressive iterations, but they are not on 4-mana walkers, not any three mana planeswalkers. So I think in these shells, expressive iteration definitely has its home. But yeah, in these like big, clunky kind of decks, I don't really like it too much. Because yeah, just you're playing 20 lands and it happens that you miss frequently. Also, what I find interesting, especially with regards to expressive iteration, I've played a fair bit of Mystic Sanctuary in these control shells, and Mystic Sanctuary loses a lot of its power if you don't play expressive iteration. So I find it really interesting that Tensai is one on expressive iteration and two not on Mystic Sanctuary.
I very much agree with that. There's nothing quite better than turning fetch land into putting EI on top. We see Narset coming down, one of the best Pyroblast targets for Arn. Arn spending one of the two Pyroblasts, so there's one red Elemental Blast left in the deck just due to there being two. First one lining up on Narset is huge. And now a Jace comes down. Is there red Elemental Blast? Are we going to see Blast number 2 coming from Arn?
Probably don't
And
think so.
I have the
It's
odds are
well,
not in favor of it, but that's what we
yeah,
were hoping. And we're
well
having a
played.
brainstorm.
It resolves. Well
Ooh,
played by Tensai, just fading out the red blast with the Narset and then resolving Chase. Or in the crop rotation in response to the
rotation.
brainstorm.
Yep.
Tensei is still on 3 cards looking at them, and crop rotation resolves. And also fetching at the same time to shortcut.
We always appreciate that, making it be less
Yeah,
shuffling. Going ahead and getting Thespian Stage. Looks like we're trying to
and
set
the
up for
stage
depth with protection.
might just be that.
The fact that we're getting stage here instead of depths does indicate that we have another way to access depths, either depths in hand or another crop rotation potentially, or night as well. Again, that 3-2 split in between the Thespian Stage, and here's the other crop rotation. Okay, all right.
And the second crop rotation. So
Now this is all right. So this is really interesting. What this now means is I imagine we're gonna go ahead and sacrifice this tap Taiga with this brainstorm on the stack. What this means is that Arn is going to have the 2 extra mana, the forest and this plateau, along with depths and stage. So going to be able to tap out at end of turn to make the 20/20, and 2 lands in play with the Sylvan Safekeeper that he was able to protect throughout this entire game after it eating 2-3 lands in order to protect itself. So at this point, what needs to happen?
I can't really see an out for Tensai here. I mean, Anne played this perfectly as it seems. Just waiting for the time Tensai feels kind of secure. Anne is just pretending to be dawdling around, waiting for Tensei to resolve one of the big spells and not having much mana open. So it's just on 1 white mana, so you can have 1 piece of interaction basically, and that's it.
Yeah,
And
this looks
Arne has
locked up.
that covered.
This looks incredibly locked up here. This brainstorm can't find anything at this point. Wow, masterfully played in order to try to find the spot to
Yeah.
thread through the needle of interaction. All
Might
right,
be
let's
that
see what the
Arne just
brainstorm
was
finds.
thinking about playing out the Safekeeper turn 1, having a lot of lands in hand, and just thinking, okay, like this is the time when it's least likely to be countered. Because it's obvious, Hansa usually, I think, if you keep 7, he must have some kind of interaction like swords or prismatic ending, and we're good for game 3, basically.
On the other part of this top bracket, we have Mior tying it up against Black Sky Doc. That's the Doomsday 8 cast matchup. The winner of that match will be the one facing the winner of this match that we are watching today, either Tensai or Arn. And they're scooping it up. Tensai sees the writing on the board, and we are going to game 3. Oh, that was so well done. I absolutely love it. The 2 crop rotations in hand, abusing the fact that Jace the Mind Sculptor is being put down. Just fantastic, fantastic sequencing. Well done. Do you think that sideboarding changes at all? Is there anything that you think that we were off base about?
I don't really think so. One One thing I haven't talked about is maybe Tensei wants to bring in one of the blue blasts to have an answer to Minskin Boo, because that's usually another lights out card that is really hard to answer. Of course, it's a bit easier if you have your flash threats like Hull Breacher and Snapcaster to at least put some pressure on it. But yeah, just have that one card for basically 3 cards out of Arne's deck is maybe a bit too much to ask for.
Yeah, it is a lot. I still think that, like we were saying earlier, you are set up incredibly well just with your game one configuration. That just bringing in these blood moons by itself is something that's pretty so that you are definitely able to do. I do think there is some also rationale besides bringing in Court of Grace. A lot of the times you don't want to do this against quote unquote creature decks. However, you do so well of controlling the board, and there's actually so few creatures in green white depths that you are able to deploy it and start to abuse it in a way that you can't against, let's say, going up against Death and Taxes, right? So that is
Yeah,
a potential card that can be brought in, but it's really up to I mean, it's really up to Tensai in terms of how he wants to be building the deck, right? Whether he wants to be making sure he has as many just impactful control cards, 1-for-1 removal spells, or if he just wants to be able to kind of grind ahead with the Court of Grace and recursive draw effects.
I don't think you really want to have Court of Grace against the deck with 4 copies of Endurance as flash threats, as well as like potential fetch for Dried Arbor.
Yeah, that's very
So
true.
you have nothing that profitably trades with Endurance. So it's not like you can play Court of Grace and be sure that you untap with it.
It is definitely difficult, but there are situations that you can pay off with it, right? So, for
Yeah,
instance, if you want to be going down on Days and Doing combo, this is a potential way that you can be having your like lights out get ahead way. Again,
yeah.
it only really works once we're at like turn 6, turn 7, when you've really lowered the resources and everyone's have a low amount of cards in their hand. But there is potential use for it. But it definitely is a risk for sure. We see Tensai starting it off with a Ponder in turn 1, Arn coming down with the Yavimaya. Turns out that snow-covered island is now a snow-covered tropical island, and we see a fetch land coming down for Tensai.
Yeah, no time on play from Arne this time. No Reclaimer, no Safekeeper, no Green Suns.
Another result just coming in. We have Marnie and Fabrizio. Marnie taking it down 2-1 on Thought Lash combo against Fabrizio's Blue-Black Shadow, which means that the bottom top of the upper bracket is going to be Marnie versus who? Oh, who was it? Who won the other one? Marnie versus
Money versus Amaru.
Malfi.
Money versus Malfi in the winners bracket, and Fabrizio versus Amaru in the losers bracket. That's one matchup I've played quite a fair bit, which is Death's Shadow against Ninjas. I've played a bunch from the Ninja side, and I think Amaru is favored in that one, from my experience. Like the Fabrizio is definitely relying on Snuffer to be a removal spell, and if your opponent just has so many important black creatures, it's not really where you want to be. But we will see. In the meantime, players are just playing lands and passing and not really committing to anything.
Arn making the comment, "You liked your card so much you didn't fetch. That's scary."
Yeah,
Uh,
that's always when you play against a control deck and they play Brainstorm and they just decide to redraw cards. You know, you're not in the best spot.
Yeah, it's very true. You know, we would be remiss without continuing to mention everybody who's putting their hard work forward today in order to bring this production to the forefront. Big shout out to McDiff, who's in the voice channel with the players, giving us updates and giving us little flashes of insight, such as "You didn't fetch, that's scary." Big shout out to Mr. Jack Dax, who's the streamer, running the stream throughout the entire day. Big shout out to everybody who's in the tables, Pres BOTW, Chaotic Bear, who's our TO for the day, and all the future commentators who will be coming in. It definitely takes a village to bring this production into play every 3 months. So big shout outs to everybody who doesn't get to put their face on camera and be seen by the community.
Yeah, but it's definitely worth it. It's just such a fun event. It's also always, of course, one of the highlights for the players. And having played an Invitational a few times myself, just a week before the actual tournament is just so mind-boggling because you know all of the players because it's obviously the ones who played a lot. So you're always trying to metagame one another, and thinking, okay, this plays on that deck, this plays on this deck, and just making your mind up for what version of like which deck you're playing, what cards you put in your sideboard. I mean, we've had this like I think about a year ago, like 1.5 years ago, when Torpor Orb was the hot card to put into your sideboard. And we've seen a bunch of sideboards today with Black Sky Dog usually always being on Doomsday and Marnie always being on the fastest Oracle Thoughtless deck. So there's an exponentially high amount of Torpor Orbs seeing play today.
It is this fascinating thing. That was actually my invitational that you're talking about with the Torpor Orbs. It's this classic thing that happens where it's like we have players like Black Sky Doc and we have players like Amaru who are so diligently stuck in their decks, not stuck, but dedicated that it is their deck. They will play it. Everyone knew Amaru was going to play ninjas. There's no way out. There's no other way about it. But then you have players like Fabrizio, who Fabrizio has played for the last 3 months just grinding with Oops. And you assume that they're going to play Oops, and they next level you by switching over to Shadow at the very last second after never showing it once in a single one of our events. I love the metagaming that comes down for it. You either get to make the craziest shot calls like I'm gonna play a Reanimator and assume that there's 0 ley lines, or you get to just like do what Arn did and say I'm playing the deck that I know and I'm going to completely alter my game plan, alter my sideboard in terms of trying to like set up for what I think is going to happen. I mean, Arn isn't playing Prismatic Ending main board in order to just jam more endurances out of the threat of Oops and Doomsday that he was expecting to be coming in, which is just fascinating for me. We do have one update. Do have one update real quick. Black Sky Doc taking down Meteor in game 3. So the winner of this match will be facing up against Black Sky Doc, one of our Doomsday experts, in round number 2.
At the same time now, we have a fight over a Hull Breacher. Ane Pyroblasting it and Tensai forcing back, so it might just hint at Tensai having the Days Undoing in hand as well. Also, you're gonna love Arne's tech for making his Thespian stage of planes. Just have the cutout box with a mana symbol in it and put it onto the Thespian stage.
I can appreciate it. That actually is a pretty nice way to solve it. So is this what you do? Do you just literally have a little box going around with every single basic type? Because you copy your opponent's basic sometimes. Like, do I need to go and pick every legacy playable land and cut out that little box for it and just have it in my deck box with me? I don't know. I like this idea a lot. I might be stealing this from Arn.
If you're really committed, you do that with dual lands, obviously.
Yeah, 100%. I need to destroy multiple Spanish for this. Get one of each duel and cut them out, just so the one time I use it, we get to have it.
Yeah, the one time you copy Underground Sea with your Thespian stage.
There's a slight life total discrepancy right now. Looks like Arn missed a Force of Will on Tensai's side, but our life totals that we have on the middle bar are correct.
Yeah. Also, interestingly enough, Tensai is actually putting his Hull Breach on the line against the potential Endurance here. So maybe he's just trying to bait it out and then sword / counter it.
One of the ways that this matchup often goes is you feel really favored on the green-white depth sides in post-board games, but you also have these games where you just get absolutely cheesed by the Hull Breacher or Narset Days Undoing loop, where if you just don't have the point of interaction for it and it happens, the game just loses on the spot, so it's this terrifying part on Arn's side where you in the long game are going to be advantaged for the most part. Unless you have the A plus B combo come in and absolutely wipe your hand.
Here you have what you've been talking about. Civil Library, on one hand, being bad against the Hull Breacher. At the same time, Arne resolving the library into the Hull Breacher to make Tensai just not care about it, and then swordsing the Hull Breacher to still get the advantage. Of course, Jeskai control is a perfect deck to just pay 8 life on the first chance you get to 7 library.
100%. You all like I'll take it's like, oh, are these just some bad cards? I'll probably still take 8 right now just so I can get the card advantage out of the library before the next Narset comes down.
Let's see where that leads.
It should be noted that Hull Breacher doesn't blow out Sylvan Library as much as it looks
Yeah,
like it should. It is an optional on resolution of the Sylvan Library trigger, whether or not you say yes to it or no to it. So flashing in a Hull Breacher in response to the Sylvan Library trigger is not as insane as it might seem on surface level.
I think we had exactly that as a judge call in one of the previous invitationals.
Yeah, yes,
Um,
we did. That is an MTGO player lesson.
yeah,
That's something we learned just from grinding through leagues. We got that library trigger going. Are doing a great job of keeping his hands separate from the Sylvan Library cards.
yeah.
Grade A must do this in terms of when we're resolving Sylvan Library triggers.
Also, side note, all the basics played in this match are from Ice Age, basically, or Ice Age versions. Yeah, Arne here's just taking 8 straight there.
And
Going
y'all,
down.
that's also a bingo board right there. Eternally just talked about talking about basic lands. That's a really good observation, though. We got Arn, who Green White Depths traditionally just plays two basics, right? A single
Yeah,
forest, single plains. Going ahead and playing those beautiful Ice Age foils in terms, and then Tensai bringing it back with the corresponding snow-covered lands.
I the snow-covered plains from Ice Age are still one of my favorite plains with the purple landscape, and also pink the pink forests are probably my favorite forest in the game.
They are gorgeous. I am definitely waiting for the Pat Morrissey signing to get those signed. All
Oh
right,
yeah,
we see the Wasteland on Plateau with the Plateau floating mana, Wasteland resolves, and then flash in Hull Breacher into one of the blast effects. That is both blast effects from Arn now, right? We've seen the Black Border Reb and the Pyroblast come down. So unless there is an endurance flip or an endurance tuck, you no longer need to worry about any red blasts coming out of Arn.
at the same time, there's also both hull breaches.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think about that.
So there's still no big flash creatures, kind of like no really threatening flash creatures as creatures. And are they now starting to play out all of his stuff? There's like the library probably paying off, getting Ramonap Excavator, the Red Blast from the Hull Breacher, and the Reclaimer down. Looks like he's pulling ahead here. Also, like this would be one of the spots where you might want to Supreme Verdict, but Tensai having the Plateau Wasteland, it doesn't have the double white for that anymore.
This is one of those games that just shows how resilient Green White Depths is, where you don't need to just be cheesing the 2020. What you get to also do is just play as a Maverick deck and just be grinding out little incremental advantage. It turns out your 2/3s and your 3/4s are just as scary as the 2020 sometimes when it comes to pressuring your opponent. You just get to be moving ahead with this game plan. I mean, Arn feels to be in a very, very good spot at the moment. We've
Yeah,
seen one Narset. Have we seen any Narsets yet, or am I confusing this with the with
no,
game?
that was the last one. Yeah, there were no Narsets yet. And also Tensai not hitting land drops.
Yeah,
I think
huge.
that's also huge, like putting Tensai in a spot where he's on basically 4 lands. Despite it being quite a lot for Legacy deck, it's still regarding Tensai's Jeskai control deck and how much it can do with a lot of mana. Like playing Narset into a removal spell or playing Narset into cantrip into removal spell is something you always want to be able to do. And being stuck on 4 lands doesn't sound too bad, but it's actually kind of a deal for that deck.
Yeah, this definitely is a matchup that plays a lot like a control matchup sometimes. The classic adage that we say in control mirrors is, oh, I missed my fourth land drop. This game's probably over. And it kind of plays very similarly in this match a lot of the time, where you do want both players, if on either side, you want to be getting up to 5, 6 mana very, very quickly. And missing those land drops just prevents you from developing your own game plan and allows you to fall behind.
Yeah, also having only 1 white mana is also not only about Supreme Verdict, but also if you need to spend it on something and then you don't have swords up end of turn, you open yourself up to being comboed out with Moridlage pretty quickly. So we
We've
will
seen
see.
Green Sun for 3, very likely getting a Knight, although technically Elvish or Endurance is a possibility. It's incredibly likely to be Knight though.
Yeah, I think so. Just get yourself towards a combo.
How great would it be if this is a bluff and he ends up getting a 2-drop or 1-drop instead? Just
Yeah,
completely
I
blow
mean, he could
the
get Godok Teak out of that.
You technically could. I still don't know how I feel about Gaddock Teague in this matchup.
Yeah,
I personally, I've been off Gaddock Teague for such a long time, which is a bummer. But it just isn't even in my board anymore. So it's like left my brain in terms of when I even want Gaddock Teague besides Storm matchups, specifically against Tess and
yeah, but we've got the knight here,
yeah,
as you
100%.
said. Also, knight is just also has a potential to get big at this point.
Yeah, there's only 2 lands in the graveyard right now, Windswept Heath and a Wasteland, so the knight is just a 4/4. However, that is not the type of game plan that we're going to be playing with this knight in the beginning. It seems very likely that we are going to be setting up, getting depths, waiting in turn, and then going for the 2020 with
Yeah,
another knight activation for Sagittarius Step.
yeah,
When the beautiful thing is, when you have your opponent stuck on 1 white mana, you only have to play around 1 swords. Like, you do not need to have to worry about the second one.
yeah, definitely. Tensai thinking here end of turn.
And
He wants to bring in surgicals.
what do
What's the
Surgical
target here? There's no more blast. Just swords is not the most important card in this matchup.
Getting Windswept Heath for information about the hand, very likely.
Looks like it. Also, Anakin. I mean, yeah, just surgicaling the Heath. Interesting. But yeah, it's most likely information.
Reveals 2 crop rotations and Wasteland in hand.
Also, notably, does that take Tensai below 20?
It does take him down to 19. It
Something that
doesn't
makes
matter.
sense.
It doesn't
Oh,
matter a ton that
13.
he's doing that because there's also this
Yeah,
Ramnap Excavator in play that would be swinging with the 2020 also.
yeah,
So it's
Tensai is
already
at
going to be
17
getting
now,
below it.
so it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't change him after that point. Also, Tensai doesn't have access to Abyss Reclaimer, to Wandering Emperor at that point. With no double white, that's another card he's been taken off by Wastelanding a Plateau.
So this is terrifying. You can't even be killing this knight preemptively because Arn has the choice of just letting it go through and then being able to still present combo with protection with these crop rotations.
Yeah,
Or if he so chooses that he does want to keep this knight in play, he also just has fetch, go get green source, or actually has Yavimaya, doesn't even need to fetch,
yeah,
but just use a crop rotation to get step and protect the knight itself. Terrifying spot to be on Tensai's side.
yeah. Tensai,
You're out
bring
at
3
this
mana,
point is
a
Blood Moon,
carry.
really.
Or Blood Moon, yeah. The thing is, does Blood Moon even, like, what does it do in this spot? Your opponent can still just
Blood
go.
Moon makes it so you don't worry about the 2020 plan anymore, but then you just need to be dealing with this 4/4 and 2/3.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. The thing is, like, what Blood Moon does in that spot, if Tensai can, Arne can sacrifice one of his lands, get depths, and have enough mana to make the token in response to a Blood Moon. Of course, it shuts off the Chiri step. So yeah, looks like that's his plan. So I think Tensai has the swords in hand, and is fetching probably for basic planes in this spot. And sacrificing, I don't know, the other stage or Yavimaya. Or the stage is copying a planes as well, so that's something that's good for Arne. Yeah, it gets the real planes, which at this moment is still a Savannah thanks to Yavimaya.
Not for much longer. We could also see Arn just going for crop rotations, like cropping into Windswept Heath and just growing this knight as quick as possible.
Yeah. Tensai.
McDip giving me McDip giving me crap about Blood Moon in chat at the moment. I'm not a big Blood Moon fan, I'll be very honest. Every format Blood Moon is legal, I always somehow play decks that get blown out by it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, with the uprise of especially Boseiju being an auto include in basically all the green-based land stacks. There's been a downswing on Blood Moons and more people going actually into Magus of the Moon.
Yeah, Magus of the Moon and Ruination is the big thing.
Yeah.
when I was playing Green White Depths at the time when Boseiju got printed, I'm like, oh, this is great for us. That's not kind of the way it played out. Actually, it kind of got worse for us because all of a sudden lands has access to two Boseijus, so you need to worry. And goes ahead and gets Dark Depths. But all of
Yeah,
a sudden, you need to worry about Boseijus as well as crop rotations when you're playing against lands in terms of them being able to blow you out. But then also all the decks shifted off Blood Moon, where Green White Depths is way better at playing against Blood Moon than it is against Ruination. So everyone shifting over to Ruination all of a sudden made the matchups a lot harder than when it's just Blood Moon. Like you play Blood Moon and then I play Depths. There's no counters on Depths. As soon as I remove that Blood Moon, we have a 2020 in play. Ever since the rules change in like 2017, I think was when that rules change happened. But playing as Blood Moon, sometimes it's just like, oh, you're helping me turbo a Depths here, and it feels great.
yeah.
And it actually looks like that being the line that Arn chooses to go for. Exactly why we are doing the why we saw the crop rotation for Blood Moon after Blood Moon resolved.
We
Cast
just save
Safekeeper.
people. That's scary.
Yeah,
Uh,
what this specifically does is it requires now Wrath, right? So now this Knight and this Ramnap Excavator are going to beat you in 2 to 3 turns. I believe it's going to be 3 turns, although it's a little unclear how big this Knight is at the moment. But could potentially be 2. But this Safekeeper coming down all of a sudden means that you can't just be buying times with swords. We
Also
predicted
having
there might be a swords in hand by holding up this white. We thought there could potentially be one, but there being no swords before the Sylvan Safekeeper hit the battlefield kind of shows us that isn't the case.
yeah. Also, the Safekeeper can just be used as a combat trick and sack all your lands to grow your Knight. Give it Shroud.
That is very true.
Give it,
Give it
so
Shroud and complete pump up. That is very true.
yeah, and like give it Shroud if the opponent swords, it doesn't matter because you just sack the next land and then swing in for lethal. So it's definitely a 2-turn clock. And Tensor basically needs to have Supreme Verdict in hand and find a second white source, which has to be a basic plains as well under the Blood Moon. And there's only one of them.
And we're actually seeing the grow. So what Arn is doing here is very likely sacking lands to give either Knight or one of the creatures Shroud. And then you would think that since it's Shroud, you only get to do it 3 times, right? You have 3 creatures, you target each of them. But if you just hold priority and don't let the first Shroud to resolve, you can just keep holding priority and sacking a land to give the same creature Shroud if you just want to be growing it.
And if the first one resolves, you're good anyway. So
I am not trying to count these lands in the graveyard. We'll figure out how big Knight is once damage is dealt.
yeah, looks like Tensor is going down to 6. I know Arn is on 6 life. Tensor is going down to 8.
So 5 lands in graveyard then. That Knight's a 7/7 at the moment. We're looking
Yeah,
for white source that. Oh, wait. Is there even a second plains in the deck? I didn't think about this. There is. Specifically
yeah.
needs to be a second snow covered plains and Wrath. EI. I think this is it. I don't think there's anything that we can have anymore.
I don't think so either. Might be a Snapcaster to jump block. That's like the one thing I could think of to buy a turn.
That does buy a turn.
But potentially Arne Tensai being held back by his own Blood Moon. I mean, he didn't have the white source for quite some time, so it's likely that the card's stranded in his hand. He has also had no cantripping in recently. So I think it's quite likely for Tensai to just take it.
Yeah. This is
But
looking more. If we had the classic advantage bars from the old GPs and Pro Tours, it would be very much on Arn's side of the table right
yeah,
here. We were
Tensai.
we were talking about how necessary making land drops is in this matchup, and that's really
Yeah,
what we saw play out in this game. Stripping Tensai off the second white because he was forced to have plateau in play, and then not really getting more lands in play meant that there was really no way to develop his game plan. He was very much forced to play the Blood Moon there, right? Because if you don't play Blood Moon, your opponent then has access to 2020 and protection on the following turn since it's a known double crop rotation. So was forced to do it and then just hamstrings himself, right? You need exactly snow covered plains and wrath to get out of this situation, and that's it.
yeah. And also Tensai obviously not having had the swords before the Safekeeper resolved.
Tensai being really a masterclass player in terms of how to play on webcam. A lot of times when we have new players come in, we like to point out Tensai as being a pinnacle example of what your play should look like. Always so very clear and dedicated in terms of this is my drawing 3 from Brainstorm. These are the 3. These are my 3 cards in hand. They are down here on the table. You can see it. Really putting on a master class in terms of how to politely and safely be playing webcam Magic.
Also, Press noting something about Tensei. I think since he's joined the server, he's played in every single invitational, and it's always been double elimination. And this would be the first time he actually ever goes to the losers bracket in round 1.
In round 1 specifically.
Yeah.
Tensai had a history of winning out the winners bracket and then winning from there. I believe 2 invitations ago was his first time ever going to the losers bracket, but this is getting pretty scary. Yeah, Ribo cannot fetch. This is just a mountain in play. And that's what we're saying with like needing it to be another snow-covered plains that you get for this Wrath.
Also, at the same time, like the Dark Depths doesn't have a counter on it. That's one thing. The other thing is that this also, I mean, automatically, I don't know, Depths should have counters on it. What did Sage do here? I'm not
No,
quite sure.
Depths doesn't have counters on it because it came in after Blood Moon
Yeah.
insert play. So that's what we're saying. Why Depths is so much better at playing against Blood Moon than it is Ruination and Magus effects, right?
Yeah,
Well, I guess
yeah.
Magus, if you remove it, you make the 20/20. But Boseiju the Moon.
Boseiju Moon gets Dark Depths Snapcaster in response. That's what's happening here. Leaving open the white, so no fetch. At the same time, this also turns on the crop rotation to get Satsiri step and give the knight protection from blue. Oh no, we're in an interesting spot. Like giving the knight protection from blue opens it up to swords in some ways, because the safekeeper would then stop the protection from blue actually. That's one of the weird interactions you have still in Safekeeper and Satsiri Step, for example.
It is one of those things your opponent can force you to be messing up things with your own Shroud. But players being very clear about what is happening on the stack right now. So we have Boseiju targeting the moon on the stack, Snapcaster Mage in response. Looks like Arn and Tensai trying to figure out exactly what's going on to make sure everything is perfectly clear. Target, it resolves, and it targets nothing in the graveyard.
I mean, the only castable spell is Surgical Extraction. I don't think Tensai wants to do that at the moment. And Arne going for the crop rotation, sacking the planes. So
Is Blood Moon still in play, though?
It looks like Blood Moon is still in play. Probably it was destroyed. And Tensai packs it up.
Interesting. All right. This is one of those difficult situations where we're not sure everything that's happening. His potential Blood Moon was destroyed at that point, and they were just shortcutting and just going before it was taken off. But Arn really putting on a master class of how to be playing these green-white depth shells against control decks. Again, showing that you don't need to be going fast. And actually, ironically enough, we kept talking about the Mox Diamonds he put in his deck, which is atypical for him. And very likely sideboarded them out because we didn't see them at all in any of those games. But Arn taking it down 2-1 against Jeskai control and really putting on that master class of how to be playing against it. Should we jump over to the bracket real quick, Eternally, and we can show everybody what's about to be going on in the second round?
Yeah, definitely. So Arne takes down Tensai. I've got the updated bracket here in front of me. At the same time, in the second bracket, Black Sky on Doomsday taking down Mior. That's definitely one of the matchups Arne does not want to see, but he specifically packed his sideboard for that with the 2 Torpor Orbs, as well as a full playset of Endurances to have at least some game, and also Deafening Silence, which has been a card he's not been playing recently. And so trying to attack against Doomsday. That's always an interesting match from a Doomsday perspective as well. Like basically there's not many spells in your opponent's deck that interact with you. At the same time, depths can always get to a fast combo themselves, so you can't just, like against control decks, you can't just dawdle around and do nothing and wait for Doomsday and pass the turn and just go for it. So you're always under some kind of pressure from depths with a potentially fast clock out of nowhere. But still, I think Doomsday is favored in that match.
8%.
In the second bracket, we have Marnie on Thought Shift against Malfi on Madness. That's also like one of the Discord specials here. Marnie has been tearing up our leagues in the recent months, and I think taking down the league title 3 times in the last couple of months, which means you have a pool of like 6 to 7 players. You have to end up first place in your league pool, and after that it goes to a top 8 with the winners of each league pool, and then you play single elimination in the top 8. And Money has been taking that down like a couple of times. I managed to stop him once and took the league title myself. But apart from that, I think he's been tearing up everything.
On the bottom bracket as well, we have Amaru versus Fabrizio. Amaru, you can see that we do a little bit of a bracket shift, right? So you Tensai, instead of being at the top of the losers bracket, goes down to the bottom. And what that does is it then makes it so it's less likely for players to have repeats, right? So it's less likely that Arn, if Arn loses his next round, runs into Tensai, because Arn will be dropping to the top of the bracket. It's just a nice little switch up we make to make sure that we have less repeats as much as we can in those lower parts of the bracket. We have Amaru versus Fabrizio. We have Ninja, so that's going to be Ninjas versus Blue Black Shadow. You alluded to earlier how you do think that Ninjas is going to be slightly disfavored in this, and I slightly do agree. And then we have 8cast versus Tensai and Jeskai Control, which is going to be definitely an interesting one. It is looking like we're going to be watching the Arn versus Black Sky matchup, so we'll be getting to see that Naya Depths versus Doomsday match. But for now, we're going to quickly jump to a break. We'll be right back. Eternally is going to jump out of the conversation for 1 or 2 rounds. But we'll be back later, and we'll have the one and only Beyond Sadistic coming and joining us. Eternally, you want to say anything to the fam before we disappear?
Yeah, really excited about this next one, but I'm also excited to see some of the matches in the lower bracket. I've played when we went to Bologna with one of our fellow mods. We would have qualified for today's invitational, but unfortunately had some other appointment today, notably his wedding, so he couldn't join us. And we played 8cast against Jeskai Control for like, I think 5 hours straight on the train. And I think Tensai's version is actually favored in that matchup. So that's basically it for the next round. And I'm excited to see what's happening.
Absolutely. Take care, fam. We'll be back shortly.